Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We're back with another exciting masterclass series in partnership with VI Worldwide. My name is Megha. I'm from the People Matters team, and I will be your host for this session. This series that we're trying to bring together is to really get in expert views on the topic of cracking the code of employee value proposition. And this series is actually a certification program which brings three modules, and you've got to attend all the three modules to be certified. So we did the first module last week. I hope all of you did attend that module on 17th of May. And this is the second module where we are trying to delve deeper into the topic, the role of leadership and the psychology of employee value proposition. So today's webinar, what are the key learning objectives that we are trying to achieve? And here's what we'll cover today. So we're going to focus on the transformational power of developing an authentic employee value proposition using the latest advancements in decision science. We will explore the reciprocal relationship between leaders and employees and how this relationship drives employee behavior in the workplace. And lastly, we will identify specific leadership behaviors that impact an organization's employee value proposition. So we have a lot to achieve in the next 1 hour. I hope you have your notebooks or Word documents or wherever you're going to take notes open to just curiously start taking notes as we have the privilege of having an expert with us to cover these topics. So let me take this opportunity to introduce our speaker for today's webcast. We have with us Dr. Brad Truck, Associate Professor, Organizational Leadership and Learning at University of Louisville, Kentucky, and Strategic and Academic Partner at BI Worldwide. Brad is an internationally recognized thought leader in the areas of employee engagement, leadership, and employee health and well-being. His evidence-based, story-driven, and visually inspiring presentations detail how leaders at all levels can build positive and inspiring workplace. Recognized as one of the world's foremost experts on the topic, his works on engagement and employee value proposition have been hailed as cutting edge and industry leading. He's been featured in multiple media outlets, including Forbes, Washington Post, Time, Business World Online, Economic Times, Hindu, just to name a few. But Brad is all over the place. So, Brad, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be spending this time with everybody talking about this idea of how we build better places of work through authentic EVPs and leadership and how all that goes together.
Fantastic. So thank you so much. And before I hand it over to you, Brad, I would just like to take a pause and actually thank BI Worldwide, our partner for this masterclass series, who's brought in their expertise and experience in this field for so long to help us design and put this certification program together. Just to share with our audience a little bit about BI Worldwide. BI Worldwide is a global R&R solutions provider with the offices in 17 locations all over the world and serving 7 million participants in over 150 countries. They have over 65 years of experience in the industry, delivering end-to-end innovative employee R&R programs for leading brands and businesses. So thank you, the team at VI Worldwide. I know you've been there behind the cameras working with us for the last few months to put this together, but thank you so much, the entire team. And just one last housekeeping tip before I hand it over to you, Brad, is for our audience, we have put some time at the end of the discussion to take questions. So if you have any questions, just use the comment section that you would be seeing next to your screen on your right to key in your question, just post them, and we will compile all of them and try and take as many questions as possible at the end of the session. So an exciting topic at hand, an expert with us. All of you are ready to take notes. So without much further ado, over to you, Brad.
Outstanding. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am, again, excited to be here and to be joining you today. Let's go ahead and get started. So there's a couple of things that I want to cover just here on our opening slide. So a couple of things here. At the bottom, you'll see some Twitter handles. So at Dr. Bishak is my Twitter handle, and then of course at BI Worldwide India is the BI Worldwide India team's Twitter handle. I would encourage you throughout the session today to tweet at us and let us know what you're thinking. If something catches your eye or there's a new idea or an insight that you really like, let us know that by tweeting at us. And I've got a couple of hashtags that are built in throughout the presentation today. So we are going to dig into this idea of specifically the role of leaders and how leaders drive an authentic employee value proposition, or how they detract from that, how they take away from that. And I want to do that by covering 4 real key areas. The first is this idea of a masterclass methodology. So yeah, I'm in my office at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, over in the United States. And here at the university, I teach on a bunch of different levels. I teach at the undergraduate level, the graduate level, and then also at the PhD level. But every now and then, I get the unique opportunity to teach what we call a master's class. And a master class is where we elevate the level of knowledge and we make some assumptions about what everybody knows about EVPs. So for example, I bet everyone here believes that EVPs and employee value proposition is important, that employee engagement is important, that we need to build great organizations, and to do that, we need really great leaders. So we're going to cover some of that information, but what we're going to do is take a real deep dive into the psychology of why that happens and how that actually works in practice. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to frame up our context. So I want to go back to our first class that we had with Mark Hirschfield just last week and retrieve and pull some of that information forward so that we can build on that through our masterclass methodology. And then the third, I want to talk with you about the principles of the employee value proposition psychology. So why does it work, and how can you leverage it as a business or as a leader? How can we actually get that done? And then lastly, I want to give you some evidence that's really specifically grounded in the leadership literature. How do leaders impact EVPs? How do leaders impact employees? And what can you do about that? So this is kind of our stair step for the afternoon today. I want to start with this question for you. This is a question that I love to talk with leaders about. What do you need to do now to prepare for tomorrow? In my opinion, employee value proposition is all about the future. It is, how do we build the organization that we want to be? What are the things that we need to do? And if we want to build that great organization, we have to start doing those things now. So what do I need to do as a leader now to be ready for the challenges that are going to be coming for tomorrow? Sometimes that looks like strategic planning, but oftentimes employee value proposition is something that we don't fold into strategic planning processes. So what I would encourage us to do today is to think about, all right, what's the kind of leader that I want to be? What's the kind of organization that I want to be a part of? What's the kind of company that we're trying to build here? And as you think about that, then we need to backtrack and think, okay, what are the behaviors and what are the processes? What are the things that I need to do today, now, to prepare for that future tomorrow? So I would encourage you to think about that. So that's kind of our context as we kind of work through the principles of the employee value proposition and what that means. Think about what it is you want to do with it and how it's going to impact your company and just the next, even tomorrow. So let's frame up our conversation and think about, all right, what is this idea of an employee value proposition and what does the psychology of EVP mean? To do that, let's go back and take a look at our class 1, and let's just recap that format. So for those of you who may or may not be familiar with the term value proposition, there is a customer value proposition, and emerging is this idea of an employee value proposition. And value proposition is a strategic marketing term, and employee value proposition was borrowed as a strategic marketing term to identify what are the kinds of environments and structures and processes that attract the best employees, and then once they get here, retain them, right? In the same way that we might think about customers, in the way that companies or retail outlets or restaurants think about you as a customer, and they try to build a value proposition around what is it that brings you into their company, what is it that brings you into their restaurant, and then what keeps you coming back. An employee value proposition is the exact same thing, just focused on the employee and work. So Mark talked a lot about this idea of moments last week, and I would encourage you, and I would highlight and agree with Mark here that moments matter. There are peak moments that bring happiness, joy, and that build towards engagement. And then there are these things that are called pits, where it's a failed experience, it's a negative experience, it's dysfunction, and how that drives the psychology of the employee value proposition. Mark talked a lot about that the why, how and why is the psychology. So don't miss that. The psychology of the EVP is the why of the employee. Why do employees do certain behaviors at work? Why do you see certain types of activities? All of this is rooted in two huge fields of science. First, behavioral economics, which is a recently emerging field in human resources and leadership development. And then also this idea of social psychology and how we interact together as teams and individuals and organizations and leaders, and what that level of reciprocity is like as we move back and forth in between those identities. So don't miss that CVP and EVP is a marketing term. It was borrowed as a strategic marketing term, but when we say EVP, it's not a marketing term. It's a term that helps us understand our employees and helps us understand the values and the alignment of the organization between the employee and the leader. And again, this idea of moments really, really matters. So I want to touch on this. This was the model that Mark shared with us last week around how we make every moment count. And I love, this is a model that is provided by BI Worldwide. And it's a model that I love and am quite invested in. You can see that there are 5 days. And I would encourage you to think about, what is it like when an employee or an applicant applies for your company and they say, can I see myself here? Can I see myself working in this organization with this leader? And then on their very first day of work, did I make the right choice? Is this the right fit for me? Is this a place that I want to stay? Am I valued? Am I appreciated? Am I happy here? What's my entire experience like? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we mean by employee value proposition. It is not something that happens one time or something that happens a few times a year. And your EVP is making every day count, making every moment count, making every conversation count, and doing that with intentionality. It's not something that just happens. But the companies, the leaders that get this right, they spend time thinking about, well, how do I create the best first day experience possible? How do I make sure that my employees know and believe that they're valued and appreciated? How can, when someone decides to leave the company, that they leave and they say, I'm happy here. This place treated me really, really well, and I'm going on to other opportunities, but I'm going to continue these conversations with my leaders, and I'm going to continue to refer my friends to this organization. So you see, EVP is a continuum. It's something that happens throughout the life cycle of the employee. It's not something that happens on a day, one day during the life cycle of somebody's time with you at work. So as we think about making every moment count, right, and that this idea that moments matter, essentially, when we say an employee value proposition, here's what we're asking. Here's the question you should be thinking about. Why would a talented person choose to work here? And the answer to that question is, in essence, your employee value proposition. Going beyond that, once someone chooses to work here, the question that I would want to know as a leader is, why would they stay? So we may attract a lot of talent. We may have a really robust talent pipeline. But once we get them here, why would someone stay? Now, it's important to know that The employee value proposition puts the responsibility on the employer, not on the employee. The employee reacts to the value proposition, right? In the same way that we react to value propositions throughout all of our life, right? We make decisions every day, moment by moment, based on the value proposition, based on what we see the value will be for us and how it aligns with our expectations. And that's in relationships in our life. That's the restaurants that we eat at, where we go to get our gas, where we go to buy our clothes. And the same psychology works here with work and employees, and understanding the answer to the question of why would a talented person choose to work here, and when they got here, why would they stay? So as leaders, this responsibility is not on your employees. This responsibility is on us as leaders and organizations to get the employee value proposition right. So one of the statistics that I'll share with you today is that the number of employees engaged after their first 6 months at work is only 40%. So there's a 60% drop off between someone's very first day of work. And remember that moments, the moments graphic I showed a minute ago on the first day, a 60% drop off from someone's first day until their 6-month anniversary. So there has to be something happening here, right? So this is either a recruitment problem. Either we're recruiting amazingly disengaged employees, or we're recruiting amazingly poor employees. I don't think that's happening. The folks in HR that I get a chance to work with, particularly in recruitment, work really hard to find the right person and to make sure that there's alignment, not only with the person, but with the leader and the team and the values and the organization. And we hope when someone shows up on their very first day of work, that this is the last place that they'll ever interview. This is it. This is where they're going to spend their career. But what the numbers actually tell us is there's a disappointing drop off between somebody's very first day and their 6 month, and that's an opportunity for us. So if it's not a recruitment problem, then it must be a value proposition issue. And if it's an employee value proposition, that's an opportunity for us, because we can move the needle on that, and we can make a significant difference, not only by applying and understanding the psychology, but also understanding the different moments in people's life at the place where they work. The challenge that I think we have, and I talk with leaders about this all the time, is that they start with a practice-based strategy. So I mentioned that I teach a consulting class here at the University of Louisville. And I'll often ask my students, tell me about some of the best places in the world to work. And what is it like to work there? And they'll say, oftentimes places like Google will come up. Google or Facebook, or here in the US, Yum Brands, which owns a variety of different restaurant chains. And I'll say, well, what is it like to work there? And they'll say, well, at Google, they give free food, and they do your dry cleaning, and they walk your dog, and they watch your kids, and they do all these great things. And I say, oh, that sounds great. They say, if we just had free food in all the places where we work, that we would have a great employee value proposition. Everybody would be really engaged. At Amazon, one of the biggest companies here in the US, they ride scooters around the large warehouses. And if you were to go in and take a look at that, you would see people riding scooters all over the warehouse floor, and they're smiling. And we would look at that and say, well, if we just had scooters everywhere, everybody would be happy. But we know that that's not true. We know that scooters don't create an employee value proposition. Free food doesn't create an employee value proposition. But oftentimes what we'll do is we'll see something that's working in another company, or we'll read an article or read a magazine, and we'll see that something is working in another organization, and we'll take that practice and we'll try to drop it in our organization. And it doesn't work like that. When we do that, we do what I call objectifying the practice, which means that we take the employee out of the employee value proposition. And that's a really, really important point. When we objectify something, we no longer recognize the human element. Now, when we start talking about the psychology of EVP, having the employee as the central focus of the value proposition is the reason we have an employee value proposition. So don't miss that. This isn't about parties on Fridays or casual work days or time off. Those things can enhance an EVP. But at the core of what you're focused on is the employee. And when we take a practice in one company, or we take a practice in an article that we read someplace, and we take it out of that and we drop it into our organization without any thought of how this might impact our employees, then we objectify the idea of the value proposition. And when we do that, we remove the human element. And we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that at all costs. So to make sure that we stay as focused as possible and that we don't objectify the idea of the employee, I want to think with you for the next 20 minutes or so around what are the principles that actually drive a strong employee value proposition. These 4 principles are grounded in about a decade's worth of research that my team and I have been working on here at the University of Louisville and with our partners, BI Worldwide, as well as researchers across the world. And here's what we know, that principle drives practice. Practice does not drive principle. Now, that's a really, really important point. When you build your employee value proposition strategy on principle, you can be assured that it's going to work in your organization because you've taken your employees into account. But when you do it the other way, where you allow practice, casual Fridays, for example, or extended time off, when you allow practice to drive principle, you're likely to fail in that endeavor because the two are reversed and they're in the wrong order. So we want to spend time, instead of objectifying the idea of the employee value proposition, we want to spend time thinking about, here are the 4 principles that really drive a very strong employee value proposition. So the first principle that I want to talk with you about is that the value of experience is cumulative. The value of experience is cumulative. What do I mean by that when I say that? The cumulative principle is grounded in 3 main kind of principled areas. The first is, it's the things that are easy to do and easy not to do. Now think about this from a leadership standpoint. It's easy for leaders to recognize employees. You can just say, hey, thank you for your contribution in the meeting today. Thank you for your hard work on this presentation. Thank you for working with this team. Leaders can recognize employees in a variety of different ways. It doesn't always have to be big. It can be something that's pretty minor. It's very easy to do that. But you know what? It's also easy not to do those things. Because guess what? Leaders are really busy people, right? I suspect that if you're in a leadership position right now, you have emails that are piling up while you're watching this webinar. You've got employees that are coming into your office that have questions for you, that need things. You have many, many things going on. But the value of the value proposition that you have is grounded in the things that are easy to do and easy not to do. These things can either work for us or they work against us. It's a cumulative experience over time. And it feels sudden, but it's a gradual build. So there are some other experiences in our life that kind of work around this principle. The first is, think about if you have kids, think about, gosh, we look back and it's their 10th birthday, and how did you grow up so fast? I hear parents ask that question all the time. Well, they grew up, it was one day at a time, right? It feels sudden, but it's gradual. It's something that just kind of works in our life. This works in the same way with our employees. Let me give you another example from my own life. Let's say for a minute that I wanted to live a healthier lifestyle and I wanted to be ready to go to the beach. Let's say I was getting ready to go on holiday and I wanted my I wanted to look the very best I could because I was going to go to the beach. And I said to you, I agreed. I said, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times this week. I'm going to eat less sweets, so no donuts, no cookies, and I'm going to eat smaller portion sizes. So I'm going to make sure that my food is proportioned out correctly. And let's say I did these 3 things for 1 week. I went to the gym, ate less, I ate no cookies, and then I ate smaller portions, and I did that for 1 week. If I did that for 1 week, do you think that this would be possible? Probably not, right? Probably not. Yeah, I know that you can't see me here, but I want you to be assured that this is not what I look like when I go to the beach. That's for sure, right? And my family would be able to attest to that. The challenge with EVPs is that your culture is intentional. It is never accidental. Don't miss that. Culture is intentional. It is not something that happens just because. We reap the harvest of the employee value proposition that we sow. And so if we treat our employees well as leaders, and we treat them with dignity, and we communicate, and we treat them with respect, and we have authenticity, when we do those things, then culture becomes something that we build towards intentionally. Everybody wants the big transformation. We want it to work for us, right? And we want it to be some big event that happens for us, but it doesn't work like that. If I want to be healthier in my life, then I have to take intentional steps every day, little decisions to drink more water, to go to the gym, not 1 week, but for 6 weeks or 6 months, not to eat cookies 1 day, but to not eat cookies for a whole year, right? And that's intentional. Those are decisions that I'm making based on what I want in the future. Remember the question I asked when we first started, what do you need to do now to prepare for tomorrow? It's cumulative and it builds over time. Your employee value proposition, the psychology of it for your employees isn't a one-time event. It's something that happens and builds over time with you as they build trust in this reciprocal relationship. As we move forward, the second proposition is that engagement of any kind is always reciprocal. I love to use the analogy of a boomerang, because a boomerang is something that if you throw it, it comes back to you. And when we invest in our employees and we invest in their future, and they believe that their future is here, and they believe as a leader that you're able to help them see their future in ways that are very authentic and very real, that comes back to you in proportion. The practice of this, the principle in action, looks like this: that employees and human beings give and take from those that give and take from us. It is this reciprocal, proportionate action, and it's proportionate in intensity. And so on someone's very first day of work, when they're amazingly engaged and they believe that they'll never work in another company for the rest of their life, they've interviewed for the very last job, they come in, they're so excited to start, and you can see that excitement, and they're giving to the organ, and they're giving to you, and they're building trust with you. And that intensity, when they get that back, then they continue to give it, and they continue to build towards it. But when they don't see that kind of intensity, and that's not matched up, then employees have a tendency sometimes to push back from the table. So the way that employees, and this is important, the way that employees experience you as a leader determines the level of reciprocity they're willing to invest in you. And that seems so easy to do, right? I'll just treat people with dignity. I'll be a really great leader, and these are the things I'm going to do. Remember, it's cumulative. It's grounded in the things that are easy to do and also easy not to do. And they work for us, or they work against us. And they're reciprocal. And so we give and take from those things that we believe give and take from us. And we give it freely. It's not an exchange. And I have this conversation with people all the time, particularly around satisfaction. And they'll say, well, satisfied employees are engaged employees. And I'll say, no, that's not true. Satisfaction is an even exchange. It's a quid pro quo. It's transactional, right? So you give to me, I give to you, because there's an expectation that happens. So it's expected that I'm gonna do this work for you, and you're gonna pay me on Friday. I'm gonna do this level of work for you, and you're gonna give me this much time off. I'm gonna do this for you as a leader, and you're gonna do this for me as your employee. There's this expected transaction that occurs. But engagement and employee value propositions don't work that way. Instead of being transactional, an employee value proposition is transformational. It's freely given because I want to, not because I have to. And when we approach our building a culture around because I want to, not because I have to, it shifts the narrative and changes everything about the way that we lead, the way that we teach, and the way that we care for our company and our employees. So if a value proposition is cumulative and a value proposition is also reciprocal, that means that it's intentional, and we, again, reap the employee value proposition that we sow. And so if we're having a difficult time leading, our organization is going through some challenge, our turnover is really high, our discretionary efforts really low, I would encourage you to think about these two principles. What's going on where we can move the needle on the experience, and you might use that moments framework that BIW has provided for us. You might use that moments framework to think about what are the ways in which people are experiencing me as a leader in this organization that builds either for us or against us and is reciprocal in nature and that is proportionate in intensity. Okay, let's move forward. So proposition number 3, a strong value proposition always drives engagement. Always drives engagement. So this is the question that I get asked quite frequently. Chuck, why do people engage at work? Tell me why people engage at work. And I think this is a really fair question. This is a great question. Here's why people engage. And we've done this research, again, over the last decade, and over and over and over again. Here's why people tell us that they engage. Your employees engage because they believe in the meaning and experienced value of you as a leader. So think about that for a minute. They believe in you. They believe that there's meaning in their work, that what they're doing actually contributes to something of great value. And they believe that trusting you as a leader is a trustworthy choice. It's worth the risk. Because when something's not trustworthy or not worth the risk, we push away from the table. We don't stay in those kinds of relationships very long. And then lastly, when they have the resources to make the choice. So employees engage because they see meaning, they feel safe, and they have the resources to do what's being asked of them. And when they don't have those things, they push back. So the engagement is the outcome of a strong employee value proposition. And engagement is built on meaning, safety, and resources. And if that's true, then that means your employee value proposition is also pillared by those things. Your employee value proposition has to have meaning. It has to be worth the risk. And you have to have the resources to be able to do the work that's being asked of you. Engagement is the ultimate why in action. It's why we do things. In my own life and in your own life, we engage in those relationships outside of work. regardless of context. It doesn't matter. Engagement is engagement. We can call it employee engagement. We can call it community engagement. We can call it family engagement. We can call it whatever kind of engagement you want. But engagement, at the end of the day, I engage in those things because I believe in those things. And when I don't believe in those things, I push back from those things. When it's not worth the risk, I'm not going to do it. When I don't have the resources to do my work, I can't. It's not safe for me to do that. Again, I push away from the table over and over and over again. And more recently, what people are telling us is that they engage when they believe their voice matters. And so as a leader, I would encourage you to think about that. Employee voice and what that means for your, will they speak up? Do they share? Do people raise their hands in meetings? How does this look in actual action? The principle of this is, I'm telling you, a strong employee value proposition will build engagement. The psychology of the employee value proposition demands that when we believe in these things, we get engagement as the outcome. But again, it is not transactional, it's transformational. It's reciprocal, it's proportionate in action, and it's grounded in those things that are easy to do and also easy not to do. It feels sudden, but it's a gradual build. Elevate the moments that matter. Think about the moments that matter for your employees, for your organization, and then put this principle into play. The last principle that I want to talk with you about is all about you as a leader. And that is this, that you need to prepare now before you need it. Because if you need engaged employees, we can't clap our hands and make that happen right now. It's something that we build toward. We must be ready as leaders when we need it, when you need it, when they need it. We have to do that hard work now. So what does that look like? Well, when I think about myself as a leader, and hopefully when you think about yourself as a leader, it's future focused. Again, I go back to the question that I opened with. What do you need to do today to prepare for tomorrow? It's not limited by your past. So it's not something that drags you down. It instead pulls you forward. It requires scaffolding and intentional work. And what I mean by that is it requires a plan. It requires you to be intentional about getting better and thinking about your employees and considering the moments that matter in their life and ensuring that they feel safe at work, that they see the meaning in their work, that they see these things and they believe those things. So it requires this plan. But don't miss that it also requires the intentional work. It doesn't just happen. We have to make it happen. And as leaders, that's our job. That's our responsibility to do that. And it answers that question. What do we need to do today to prepare for tomorrow? The role of leadership in this is huge, and it is undeniable. Leaders drive the psychology of the employee value proposition. They drive the reciprocal relationship. They define what it means to have moments that matter. Leaders elevate the things that they care about. And when employees see meaning in their work and they're safe and they believe in you and they believe that the organization has their best interest in mind, you cannot help but get engagement as the outcome. You cannot help but reap the rewards of a strong and authentic employee value proposition. And that is the psychology of why it works. So everyone's employee value proposition here is going to be different. It's not going to be the same as mine. It's not going to be the same as your competitors. It's not going to be the same as the company that's next door to you. Your employee value proposition is going to be unique to you. But this is why it works. It's cumulative and it builds over time. It's reciprocal in proportion and intensity. It builds towards engagement. And it requires us to think about the future and to begin building towards that now. So if I were you, I would wonder, what does this EVP feel like in action? So I want to talk you through some research that we've done here at the University of Louisville. So the first case study is what EVP feels like in understanding the role of leader dysfunction. So we did some work here where we defined what we call dysfunctional leaders. And what we estimate is that between 28 and 36% of the global workforce works with a leader that we describe as being dysfunctional. All right, and so we call those leaders stinky leaders because they professionally skunk their employees, and the kinds of behaviors that I'm going to show you in a minute, they tend to stay with people over long periods of time. So we developed something that we call the stinky taxonomy, right? And here are all of the behaviors that employees told us that their leaders, that they experienced as a way of their leaders. So look, if you would, for a minute, at the very top right-hand corner, and you see ignores my opinions. Now, ignoring somebody, this happens to me on a daily basis. When I go home at night, my wife ignores my opinion. It doesn't matter what I want to watch on TV. It matters what my daughter wants to watch on TV. It doesn't matter what I want to eat. It matters what she wants to eat, right? Like, think about this. But when we're at work, and it happens one time, we can brush that off. But the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time it happens, it begins to build towards a negative value proposition. But look at some of the other words here as well. Takes ownership of my ideas, breaks promises, makes negative comments, is rude to me, have an unimaginable workload, impossible deadlines. Any of these things by themselves, one time, no big deal. I can handle an unmanageable workload for 1 week. But when I have an unmanageable workload for the duration of my career and it's impossible for me to do my job because I'm massively under-resourced, I push away from the table. And why would I not push away from the table? Employees who work with leaders who do these things consistently over time tell us that they lose sleep. They lay awake in bed at night, and they can't get a good night's sleep. They report lower levels of well-being. They have trouble with physical functioning. They have manifested pain in their body. They're more likely to be clinically depressed. So we see the psychology of the leader and the way that people experience their work bleed over into these other areas of life. And this is really important. Your work as a leader impacts your employees well beyond the workplace. And that's why having a positive and compelling and authentic value proposition that drives your organization forward. We don't have employees that have these issues when we're working in a place that's positive like that. As we move forward, what does it look like when leaders build up others in the organization? What does it look like when leadership is positive? We developed this model we call this the compassionate leadership model. And at the very top, you see 6 behaviors: dignity, authenticity, presence, accountability, empathy, and integrity. And these are the behaviors that were defined as positive leader behaviors. And then below that line, you see other behaviors and other kinds of words: humiliation, insincerity, being distracted, being avoided, and so on and so on. And so the idea here is that when I'm not treating people with dignity as a leader, I'm treating them from a place of humiliation. When I'm not being authentic, I'm being insincere, and so on and so on. What we find is that there's a 20% swing in intent to turnover or intent to leave when employees are not connected directly to the leaders. But when they are connected directly to the leaders, here's what the research tells us: that they're more engaged, that they're more satisfied, that they give higher levels of effort. They're more likely to be to report high levels of well-being. They're more innovative and creative, and there is lower levels of intent to turnover. So essentially, if we break that down even further, and we just take those 6 behaviors, when leaders promote a positive EVP, turnover is very, very low. So all of the white and gray dots that you see here on the screen are employees telling us that they're going to stay at the company for the next 12 months, that that's their plan. And the 2 leader behaviors that drive this are dignity and accountability. Now, how hard is it to treat people with dignity? That's easy to do, right? It's simple. We can do that every day. Why does it cost me any money to do that? But we all know leaders, and we've all been in positions where we've not been treated with dignity, right? We've been in those positions. It's easy to do. It's easy not to do. proportionate in intensity, and it's based in meaning, safety, and resource availability. If we look at well-being and we look at health, all of the darker circles that you see here on this graphic are people who say that their well-being and their level of health is really high. The leader behaviors that drive that, again, we see dignity, empathy, and accountability. So in essence, leadership matters. Leadership matters. Here are, when employees report a positive EVP, they have no problem sleeping. They report that they eat healthier, they have higher levels of well-being, and they actually drink less alcohol, which was an interesting finding for us. So here's what I would leave you with, and then we'll open it up for questions. The first thing that I would want you to know is that your employee value proposition will require ongoing transformation. It's not an event. It's not something that happens. And it's going to require active collaboration, not only with you and your organization, but with your teams and your employees. And it's going to require you as a leader to not only lead, but also be willing to put yourself in a position of serving others. So with that, I'll wrap it up. We'll move into some questions. And again, I want to share our Twitter handle with you so you can connect with us and we can continue this conversation.
Great, fantastic, Brad. I think it's such a fantastic conversation. And while you shared the Twitter handles, I actually went on to LinkedIn and I posted there, tagging you, because I thought I grabbed a lot of insights there. So thank you so much, Brad. And I can see a lot of questions flowing in. So let's just quickly jump into them and try and see what we can achieve in the next 14 minutes. So my first question, Brad, that I'm picking up from the audience is coming from Deepak Gurara, and he's asking, who is responsible to build the employee value proposition? Is it HR, line managers, or the CEO? What is your thought on it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Oftentimes, this is something that is centered in human resources, but I would say it requires a group of people. The CEO absolutely drives the value proposition. Every leader in the organization drives the value proposition. Sometimes, again, this is an HR function, but it is not an exclusive HR function. Everyone in the organization has some responsibility, including me, right? So even as an individual contributor, as an employee, I may have the opportunity to drive and influence the value proposition of the people that I work with, just by the way that I treat them and interact with them and how I step up and create experiences for them.
Got it. I think there is a follow-up question on it coming in, and it pretty much aligns with what you're talking about, but it's the how piece. So the question that is a company will fall short of creating an authentic EVP if it leaves up to a few people and merely send out some messaging. So it's aligned to what you're saying. Everyone drives the EVP. The question is, how do we drive engagement from internal and external stakeholders at all levels to implement a great EVP?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So I would say that engagement is the outcome. It's the lag measure, right? And so if you have really high levels of engagement in your organization, whether you have data around that, and if you don't currently gather insights, employee insights by way of surveys or focus groups, or you're not working with someone, I would encourage businesses to do that. I think that's important to get data, because data changes the narrative of the story. Data changes everything. It goes from this is what I think's happening to this is what the data is telling us is happening. So the first thing is engagement is the outcome. So I think it's important to position engagement in the right place. How do you drive an EVP? I think that's through conversations. I think that's through coming together and deciding what is that EVP? What is our employee value proposition? And a company like BI Worldwide is an expert at helping companies understand what their employee value proposition is. I would encourage, sometimes people come to me and they say, hey, Chuck, can you help us do that? I'm one guy, right? I'm just one guy. I would get a team of people together to have a conversation around what is our employee value proposition? What does it mean to work here? Why do people come here to work? What is our differentiating proposition? What kind of company are we? What's the talent that we're looking to attract? And how do we keep that talent once they get here? What's the right rewards and recognition structure, right? It's not just about having an anniversary party on a 5-year or 10-year cycle, but it's about what's the right recognition strategy for our company. So there's a bunch of conversations that have to happen around understanding what your EVP is and how you drive it. I would start with the question that I posed earlier. Why would a talented person choose to work here? And the second question is, once they got here, why would they stay? And if we can answer those questions, then we're well on our way to defining what our employee value proposition is. And if we get that right, then engagement is going to follow.
Great, fantastic. So I hope all of you are getting answers to your questions. So the next question that I'm going to pick up is, can CVP affect EVP? And what is the effect of a great external branding initiative on the EVP?
Yeah. So I would reverse it. So can CVP impact EVP? I would say a great EVP, a great employee value proposition, can impact your customer value proposition, right? And we've all been in places where we've had really amazing service, and we continue to go back to that place because we love the people, we love the offering, we love the choice, we love the person that we interacted with, and we tell people about it, right? But when we have a really negative customer experience, our customer value proposition is bad, it's often due to bad service. And so I would say that EVP likely drives your CVP. If you get the people part right for your organization, the rest will likely follow.
Fantastic. So the next question is from Gaurav, and he's asking, can you share a framework to internally develop an EVP?
That's a good question. Can I share a framework? The loose framework is the one. I think the loose framework is the questions that I've mentioned today. If you want to dive deeper, what I would encourage you to do is to partner with an outside company who specializes in developing employee value propositions. And you can do that no matter how big or small or how new or maybe old your company is. Those things don't matter. What I think matters is that you work with someone who's an expert in that area, who can really help you drive and articulate your employee value proposition. But if I was going to start with a framework, I would start with the moments that I mentioned earlier and that Mark mentioned in the last masterclass. And then I would think about those questions that I posed. Why would somebody work here, and then why would they stay?
So I think the other question that's coming in is, actually it came a little while ago, is really that what you've been sharing so far sounds like attracting and retaining talent. So how is EVP any different?
How are those things related together?
So the question is, how is employee value proposition, the concept of employee value proposition, any different from attracting and retaining talent?
Yeah, that's good. So attracting and retaining talent is something that we do, right? As a leader or as a business. An employee value proposition is the framework from which we do it. So I wanna attract and retain talent. Well, how do I do that? I need a compelling value proposition. And I didn't say this earlier. Your company has a value proposition. Everyone who is here today, including me, the company that I work for, whether or not we know it, we have an employee value proposition. We may not be able to name it, but I bet our employees can. And they can tell us where the gaps are and where the things that we do really well are. So an EVP isn't something that someone's going to create for you. It exists already. So if I want to retain and attract talent, which is important, right? The framework from which I do that, we're giving that a name and we're calling that an employee value proposition. That's a great question. And I think that's an important. One is an activity, one is a framework.
Okay, fantastic. The next question is, according to the study by Gallup, the best EVP taps into the emotional and behavioral elements of work. So, what are some of those critical emotional and behavioral elements in your opinion?
So our research would align with Gallup, and what I would tell you is that when someone is emotionally engaged in their work, you're more likely to see positive outcomes. So less turnover, better health, more discretionary effort, and so on and so on. Emotion is the tipping point to behavior. That's why your employee value proposition has to be right. It's got to be aligned.
Mhm.
Emotion creates experiences, these peak moments for us that then draw us forward. We can't rationalize intent to turn over, or we can't rationalize effort. We can't tell people, look, I need you to work more, right? Or I need you to do this. They may or may not do those things. But when someone feels that here, we do that because we want to do that. Remember the difference between transaction and transformation, satisfaction versus engagement. When employees don't feel that emotion, it's a transaction. When employees feel that emotion and they feel emotionally connected to the company, it's transformational and it's a completely different experience.
Got it. Got it. So I think I'm just looking at the clock right now, and I'm trying to see if I can take one more question. So the last question that I'll pick up now is: Can organizations change its EVP frequently? And if yes, what's the ideal period?
Can they change their EVP frequently? I wouldn't recommend that. I don't think so. I think an authentic employee value proposition is one that's stable and enduring over time. And it's something that comes to define the culture of the company. And I think we could also say, could we change the culture from time to time? And how frequently should we do that? And I don't think that that's a good idea. I think there are times when we need a culture shift or a culture nudge, and we may need an EVP nudge to move us in a different direction if we've reframed our EVP. But I think if we spend the time and we get this right, and we answer the questions, why would someone choose to work here and why would they stay? How do our employees experience meaning and value in their work? How do they know that they're valued? Do we have the right rewards and recognition structures in place? If we get that stuff right, we don't want to change our EVP because it's working for us and our employees are living better lives as a result of the interaction with the leadership, you and I, and also the organization. And that's an amazing experience.
Fantastic, great. So I think we've had some fantastic questions and such a great session. So I want to use just the next 3 minutes we have on the clock. But Dr. Shak, if I could request you to summarize the discussion that we've had in the last 1 hour, and if you were to put some, some 2 to 3 key takeaways for our audience in the next 2 minutes, I think that will be super useful.
Yeah, sure. So I think to summarize everything, what I would say is that the EVP that you have drives outcomes that you want. And so engagement is one of those, but it's an outcome measure of that. The reason that your EVP works, the psychology of that EVP is grounded in 4 basic principles: the cumulative principle, the reciprocity principle, the engagement principle, and the readiness principle. If you get those things right, you can fundamentally shift and transform the way that your employees experience you and the work that they do. Now, the last thing I think I would leave everyone here with is, regardless of your position in the organization, you have the opportunity and the ability to significantly impact someone's day. I would encourage you to care for people, to treat them with joy and to have joy for those people, and to work in ways that help sharpen the saw of everyone that you work with, that your work matters as a leader. You matter, your work matters, and your employees, they're gonna pick up on that, and you'll see. If you take me up on this and tweet me later, let me know how this works. When you treat people with dignity, it shifts the way that they experience their day. And I would challenge everyone here to find an opportunity today to treat someone with dignity and watch what happens.
Powerful, I will say. And with that, thank you so much, Dr. Bradshaw. It has been a fantastic session. It has been fantastic hearing you, and of course, a great interactive question and answer session as well. So, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Shah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the closure of our webcast. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience and such an inquisitive one. As always, I hope you enjoyed this session as much as I did, and I hope you did go on Twitter or any other social platform to tweet or share your learnings. And I would also like to thank our partner, BI Worldwide. Like I said at the beginning, they've helped us put this all together with their expertise and experience. So thank you so much, BI Worldwide team. We will be back with the third module on May 31st, which is bringing employee value proposition to life. So do join us there as well because you actually have to complete all the modules as well for the certification. So I hope to see you there. And before I close, just one small request to all of you to please do fill in the feedback survey because it really helps us enhance the experience that we bring to you in every conversation. So please do send us your suggestions and feedback, and we'd love to hear from you. With that, I'll close the session today. Thank you so much and have an inspiring evening ahead. Bye bye.